Dustin Schutte from Saturday Tradition is with me. Keegan Nickoson from thehoosier.com, Indiana Rivals, joins me. The NCAA returns tonight, of course, but most people around here are wondering about the coaching change for Indiana basketball. Keegan, welcome aboard.
How are we doing? Good morning.
A little bit of a surprise in the coaching change for Indiana with Dane Fife. I'm not going to make too big of a deal out of it because it is what it is, and that's what it's going to be. Nothing's going to change. So, and rumors and all that stuff, they're going to float around a why, and it doesn't. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It didn't click between those two, and the thing is, and I'm not surprised, is because it wasn't Woody's choice. And I'm not saying that about Dane. I'm just saying Woody didn't hire Dane. Scott Dolson basically hired Dane.
Gotcha.
So that's and to be truthful, none of his assistant coaches. The other two were already in place.
Mm-hmm.
So he did not put a staff together. He didn't hire Thad Matta. Indiana hired Thad Matta. So he didn't really know how to put a college staff together, I don't think, is why this happened. And then that kind of led over to some of the coaching things that went on. But as far as a replacement, that's going to be the next question. And the thing is, I think it needs to be someone who has a ton of college experience, because whether Woody wants to admit it or not, he needs help coaching the college game. Mm-hmm. It is a different game, and I don't know that he has acclimated himself to that yet from a strategic standpoint and whatnot. But there we go.
Yeah, he talked about it, and some of his media availability, I can't remember if it was post-game or during the week, but it was near the end of the season, just how much his assistant coaches have helped him, like during the game and managing games. And he mentioned Fife, and it was talking about how he manages timeouts, because during the season, it was obvious that he did not know how to manage his timeouts. He was using too much of them. He was letting people go on runs. So it's going to be very interesting. But is Kenya Hunter being elevated just out of the question? Like, that's not a possibility?
Well, say that again.
Kenya Hunter being elevated?
Oh, I expect. I would be almost surprised if he wasn't elevated in order to keep him from that 2 spot, from the 3 spot to the 2 spot. Here's basically what it was. Dane Fife was the number 1 assistant, Kenya Hunter number 2, and Yasir Rosemont number 3. I'm thinking both of those guys get elevated to keep both of them, because Kenya Hunter, he's would be welcome anywhere. He's a great recruiter. He's got a lot of coaching experience. And then Coach Ya, like John mentioned, friends with and experience with Kenny Payne in Louisville. But why the hell would he want to go to Louisville? That's a mess to me. I mean, I'm serious. Why would anybody want to go to Louisville? It's just going to be a mess. They're still going to be hit with NCAA sanctions. And you have no idea what that's going to be. And you've been through yet another head coach there. They've been through 2, 3, if you want to count the interim, head coaches in just the last couple of seasons. So I don't know that he would leave to go down there, to be honest with you, especially if Indiana is on an upward trajectory, if he feels it's on an upward trajectory.
Yeah, I would definitely expect him to stay. I think he has a lot to do with recruiting, and I think he's gotten a lot of these kids in, like Schifino and Cups and Newton. So I think the fallout, if he did leave, might be bigger than people could expect. But I don't know why he would go to Louisville either, in all honesty. That just seems like it's going to take a while before they kind of get back to balance. And Indiana, like you've talked about, this is a progress year, and they're on the up and up.
And as far as a replacement, that's going to be, I mentioned earlier, I don't think they need to do the IU thing. They just need to do the winning thing. Get the players that are going to win games for you, Dustin. I mean, it's just all about winning. You should be able to recruit the state of Indiana just by winning. If you're winning, they will come. I promise you. But you don't have to have every kid from the state of Indiana. You don't have to have a roster like Purdue's. Yeah, it would be great, but that's not the case because the best at every position does not come from the state of Indiana. Indiana produces some great talent, especially per capita. But you get the best of the state, and then you get the others, like Jalen Hood-Schifino, those types. And I think that has to continue. But they have to have the ability to recruit the state of Indiana as well. And they're kind of at a loss right now with that, it seems.
Well, I mean, I've never thought Indiana's recruiting, you and I are going to disagree on this. I've never thought Indiana's recruiting has been an issue. It's the lack of development. Now, you can talk about the type of players Indiana got in, and maybe it's not the same caliber as guys that are going to, Gonzaga or Kentucky or some of those other programs. But in terms of, you look at, again, I've mentioned this, particularly last year, when you look at Indiana's roster top to bottom and Purdue's roster top to bottom, Indiana's was better. Now, that's probably not the case this year, but last year it was absolutely better. And you couldn't find ways to beat a lot of those teams. I thought that they had a top 5 roster in the Big Ten, and you still couldn't get into the NCAA tournament. You still finished the Big Ten regular season with a losing record. So I don't think recruiting's been an issue. And you don't have to get the idea that you have to recruit the state of Indiana it's a big deal because there's a lot of talented players here, but that's also an older mentality. You just got to go find the best players. And I think Indiana does a good job of that. And I think that there's a lot of appeal to play for a guy like Mike Woodson. And if you get the right assistant coaches in there, to me, the assistant coaches in college basketball, this is going to sound bad, but to me, there are very few who make an actual in-game coaching difference. There are some you can tell that they might have a coach might have an offensive and a defensive coordinator, something like that. But you've got to get the guy who's got experience on the recruiting trail, because that's the biggest. Without Mike Woodson having that long experience, still just 1 year in, you've got to have those assistant coaches who know the recruiting trail, know how to pitch, know how to go into somebody's home and persuade guys to come in. And I think that's what Indiana needs to look for more than an X's and O's. But I do understand where Keegan's coming from with the timeout situation and letting teams go on runs and just kind of the little things that are different between the NBA game and the college game. You do have to have some knowledge of the game, obviously, but to me, it's recruiting is the bigger deal than anything else.
Yeah, because after we've got one season in the books and we'll have after another season, but we'll see, are those differences changed? Is that mass substitution thing, we thought that had gone away already because it had already proved that it was not working out too well, but they continued that a few times. Michael comments, if you want an IU guy, which I don't think it's necessary, but how about AJ Moye as far as player development? Now that's different. He is been doing nothing but working on player development. He runs the Mamba Academy out there in Los Angeles, and that's what he does, player development. Or someone like Charlie Miller, player development. This staff doesn't have someone who works on player development, it seems. And we didn't see much of that throughout the season yet again, Keegan.
Yeah, I think a big thing about player development is I think that's what Woody talked about when he first got here, because he talked about teaching them fundamentals and how these kids came up not knowing fundamentals and they were coached differently than he was. So I think Woody has kind of a big hand in developing these guys and just making sure that they can play the game the right way. But in terms of kind of replacements, I know Brian Walsh, I think he's one of the team coordinators. I know he said he was on hopefully the path to become a head coach. He's really involved in like the kind of game management, I guess. You could see him really passionately on the sidelines, just one of those head coaches kind of yelling.
So my fear is that he's learned under Archie Miller his development has come under Archie Miller and the one season under Mike Woodson.
Then why is he on staff?
Same reason everyone else. Not the two assistant coaches came from Archie Miller. It was a lack. That was a lack to me. It's a lack of having
Yasir Rosemond. Can you clarify? Yasir Rosemond was not on Archie's staff. You said that earlier. He was not on Archie's staff.
My bad. I thought he was on there the last year.
Kenya Hunter was the only one retained.
Was he? Okay. I thought Yasir was on that last season, but thank you for that correction. Yasir was not on Archie's last staff.
Well, okay. Here's where I want to go with the development aspect of this. A lot of that happens throughout the course of a season. You're not going to see a player develop. That's about when you build your team, right? Like the development happens in the off season. So is it possible that we didn't see that kind of development because, again, this is Mike Woodson's first year. He gets hired, and then all of a sudden, you have to do recruiting. There's a lot of stuff he's got to learn on the fly. So to me, that's why I think you'll find out how good of a coach Mike Woodson is and how much he places an emphasis on development this offseason, because now he's kind of in a groove. He knows a lot better now what he needs to do on the recruiting trail, how to develop players, what the rules are and what they aren't in the NCAA, all that good stuff. To me, I think you might see more of that development side this year. And I know there's going to be a lot of moving parts with guys leaving, graduating, transferring, what have you. But I think this year is when you're going to see how good of a developer he is. And I don't know the answer to that question. I just think you'll find out more this year than you will last year because, as Jim said, you spent 3-4 years under Archie Miller where there was clearly no development. That's hard to fix in a pretty short offseason for him.
Yeah, and I feel like, Jim, as someone who lives in Indiana and who's around Indiana fans and knows kind of the vibes, how many years do you give it until you start questioning whether Woodson was the right guy and maybe they should find someone else?
Well, I don't give it any time because that's my job. I immediately start questioning.
I know, but in terms of getting his recruiting classes in.
But from a fan standpoint, they have to wait. They've got to wait 3 years.
Okay. That's what I was thinking because I mean, Archie had all those years and he got his guys and never reached the NCAA tournament. And I think, counting correctly, that Woodson had 5 of his guys and they were transfers.
Yeah.
And he got back there. So you see this trending upward, and when he gets his guys and he can court a lineup that can make shots, actually, and I mean that's one thing that you can't really develop the ability to shoot a basketball.
You also have to look at how many games this year that they lost that they shouldn't have lost. So I mean, legitimately should not have lost. I'm not talking about all of them. I'm just talking about a handful that you just absolutely should not have lost. And that puts them even further ahead of where they were last year, which they're already ahead. But this would have put them even further ahead. And then you add in what you're saying when you get Jalen Hood-Schifino in here, when you get CJ Gunn in here, those guys, that is going to make I believe that is going to make a difference. And this team is going to be better next year than it was this year. I believe that.
I'm going to chime in here. I don't think it matters. Legitimately, hear me out, because so many of those players are going to be gone from this team. What does it? It's not like this entire team's going to be returning. So what does it matter? You got back to the NCAA tournament. You won some games in the Big Ten tournament. You were back on the national spotlight. You finally beat Purdue. You beat a good Ohio State team. They beat the Big Ten champs in Illinois. They have some signature wins on their resume. You can tell the program's trending up. Does it really matter whether they were beaten in the first round or the Sweet 16?
Not to the most people, no.